Here we have the steps for factoring trinomials using what we call the AC method. So a trinomial is a polynomial with three terms, and typically it's a quadratic, meaning that the highest exponent is a 2. And so the usual form for a trinomial is this form ax squared plus bx plus c. So a would be whatever the coefficient is on the squared term, and b would be the coefficient on your variable term, c would be the constant or the number by itself. So for example, 3x squared minus 10x plus 19, a would be 3, b would be negative 10 because the sign goes with it, c would be positive 19. So these are the steps for going through the AC method, which is a method you use to factor trinomials. These are easiest to see with an example. So we're going to look at this first example, which is the 3x squared minus 8x plus 4. So the first thing I would do here is I would just identify what are A, B, and C. In this case, A would be positive 3, B would be negative 8, and C would be positive 4. And so this is called the AC method because that's essentially the first step is to find AC or A times C. So in this case, I would do 3 times 4 and get that AC is 12. And so then if we're looking at this step, it says find all possible pairs of values whose product is AC. Or in other words, find all the factors of 12, right? What are all the possible things I could multiply together to give me 12? So that could be 1 times 12, but that could also be negative 1 times negative 12, or 2 times 6, or negative 2 times negative 6. Could also do 3 times 4, or negative 3 times negative 4. So I think that's a complete list. But you can see when your number is larger, this might take a little longer to list out all the possible pairs of values. And so then what I'm going to do is from this list of values, I'm going to choose the pair whose sum is B. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, if I look at all these pairs of numbers, if I were to add them together, would that sum give me, in this case, B is negative 8? So like the first one, 1 plus 12, that would be 13. Negative 1 plus negative 12 would be negative 13. 2 plus 6 would be positive 8, so that's not what I want. But this one, that one's going to work for me. Negative 2 plus negative 6. That's the one that adds to give me negative 8. So then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to rewrite my trinomial, but I'm going to replace that x term with the sum of those two numbers. So I'm going to rewrite this 3x squared minus 8x plus 4, but instead of writing it as minus 8x, I'm going to write it as these two numbers. I'm going to write it as minus 2x minus 6x, and then just copy down the plus 4. So I just rewrote my original problem, replacing that negative 8x with these two numbers. So if I were to combine like terms right now, I would actually get back to what I started. So I don't want to do that, but you can see where this is coming from. So all I've done basically with these first 5 steps is I've just rewritten a polynomial with 3 terms to now be a polynomial with 4 terms. Now, why in the world would I do that? Why would I want my polynomial to have 4 terms? Well, because I know from previous work that if it has 4 terms, we can factor by grouping typically. So that's what we're going to do. So that's the last step, is to, now that it has 4 terms, let's factor by grouping. So what's the GCF in the first group? In this case, they have an x in common. So that would leave me with 3x minus 2. Bring down my minus sign. The last group has a 2 in common. So if I factor that out, that's going to be negative 3x minus 2. I'm sorry, negative 6 divided by negative 2 would be positive 3x. And then 4 divided by negative 2 would be minus 2. And so I've got the same thing in each parentheses. 3x minus 2. And when I factor that out, that leaves me with what's left there is x minus 2. And that's factored. All right, so let's go through this on the next example. So on this one, A would be 5 and C would be negative 3. So AC would be 5 times negative 3 which is negative 15. So I'm going to list all the factors of negative 15. So this could be negative 1 times 15, or 1 times negative 15, or negative 3 times 5, or 3 times negative 5. And I think in this case, that's all the factors of negative 15. So I want to choose which pair of factors will add to give me my middle term. In this case, 1 plus negative 15 would give me negative 14. So I'm going to rewrite my polynomial, but instead of minus 14x, I'm going to write it as plus 1x minus 15x, and then just bring down the rest, bring down the minus 3. And technically, this wouldn't matter if you wrote that in a different order. So if you had written this as 5x squared minus 15x plus 1x minus 3, that wouldn't matter. Your work would be different, but your answer will be the same. So it doesn't matter what order you write those two numbers in. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and use grouping now that it's in 4 terms. So my first group, I can factor out an x, which would leave me with 5x plus 1. I'm going to bring down the minus sign and factor out a 3. Negative 15x divided by negative 3 is positive 5x. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1. I have the same thing in both parentheses, which is 5x plus 1. When I factor that out, that leaves me with x minus 3. So this is your typical AC method where you have like 2 lines of work shown and then your answer.